Hello, everybody. We are here for another week. This is working with metaphor and simile. And to use a metaphor, I'm death warmed over. How about you guys? Do you guys have a metaphor to describe your week?
Maybe a simile.
I feel
My
like
week was like a big ball of wax leaving a
A big,
disjointed square.
a big ball of wax. Is that the one from your ear?
Basically. Yeah, I didn't have COVID. I just had a big ball of wax stuck in my brain.
oh,
Really.
Life is a ball of wax. It's tacky. It's not always pretty, but sometimes you need it to keep the riffraff out. There you go. There's one.
how about you, Max? I know you've had just a relaxed, easy week doing
Yeah,
nothing.
I don't know. Maybe as if I just been, chewed in the mouth of some, some I don't know, choose the monster, Chimera Hydra, whatever.
Space god?
What?
Some space
You've been
god?
been
Yeah.
wrestling one, or did you say it was in your mouth?
No, I was in its mouth.
Oh, okay.
So,
Was it good for it?
I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see next week.
so this is this choose your own monster week over here with simile and metaphor. And welcome to all the students that are out there watching this. We're going to try to keep it focused. I think Jamal's recovering from
Yeah.
being sick. I am
Having an alien in my brain.
sick. Yeah. I went to the doctor today, though, so there's hope. I know Maxwell has just been running everywhere in his new position of director. And Colleen, what's your story this week?
Um,
Not to put you on the spot.
Good, Amy.
Falling at a termite. Yeah, that sums it up right there. Amy summed it up for
can't
us.
see the comments. Oh, wait a minute. I'm still on the private chat. That's why. That's it. I am actually living in a little bubble of nothingness.
Okay, so that describes your week pretty good, I would say. All right, well, let's get into this then. These students came here to not hear us complain about our weeks because we can do that in Facebook chat, but not mine because I'm ignoring Facebook right now. Let's get into this. All right, so first question, how do you guys approach the use of metaphor and simile in your poetry? Does it come naturally to you, or do you consciously try to work that in there? And I'll say, as for me, I feel like I use it naturally. I think that it helps to communicate. So if I'm trying to communicate an idea, it's one thing to say, this is my experience. I'm a woman of this experience, but Jamal might not get that. Like he might not know what it's like to be a woman of my experience. So a metaphor,
You
I
don't
find.
know that. No.
I said might. I'm not making any assumptions here. But that's like we had a discussion with Tortured Willows like that, where you were like, that was some good perspective I hadn't conceived of.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of metaphor and simile are good for us, particularly metaphor. We're just kind of lumping simile in there so it doesn't feel unloved. But metaphor can build that empathetic bond. So you can say hungry to somebody, and hungry might mean a different thing to somebody in Brazil with zero money and a different thing to an American with lots of money that just means I didn't get the snack I wanted. Not saying there's not like truly hungry. I'm just trying to say we have different levels of it. But by using a metaphor, you can say metaphor or simile, you can give the exact experience of hunger that you're trying to convey in an empathetic and emotional way to a poet. I feel like I just went far too long on that, guys. So take over.
I will add, for me, it's like metaphors. All I do is metaphor. I think sometimes I'm like a weirdo that just talks in metaphor for no reason in everyday life.
Sometimes.
Like literally all the time. So like people are like, what the hell is he saying? What's he talking about? But to me, metaphor is kind of like it's like a way of it's a verbal symbol in a sense. It's a way of maybe like conveying a feeling that no single word in the language can do on its own. Like a lot of times, like to convey that and to connect people, you can say so much in a single like metaphor and load it up with so much meaning and feeling and all these things that any word or sentence on its own just couldn't convey. So to me, it's almost like a verbal symbol. It's verbal symbolism in a sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I use
I just like degrees of magnitude. Pixie put that in chat. I really like that. What were you saying, Colleen? Before I rudely interrupted you.
no, it's okay.
Like a rude person is my simile.
Like a mockingbird.
Yeah. Like a jerk.
Metaphor both comes naturally and sometimes I choose it. So it depends what I'm writing. I may go for a particular metaphor or it may just start to come out in a poem. So it really kind of depends what I'm writing, when I'm writing it, how I'm feeling when I'm writing it.
I'm just waiting until everyone's done. I don't want to interrupt. I don't know. I think I think it is on purpose when I do, when I do choose it, and then otherwise, like, then when I'm not, I think otherwise it is just kind of stream of consciousness for me, especially with prose poetry. Because like, and this isn't poetry, but this is, we just had a panel for Other Terrors yesterday, and we were talking about our stories, and it's like, so my story in Other Terrors was called Black Screens, Yellow Stars, and it was a story about a Jewish man and a black man who were lynched together, set in this time, obviously, for everything that's going on, and I won't get too much into it, but the point was I used a lot of metaphor and simile in that story to really to explore the dread and the terror and everything that comes with being othered in a moment like that, because the whole story, and I wrote that like a poem. I actually wrote it as a poem first, and then it was only 1,500 words, and it's very much the whole thing is just them talking to each other before obviously before the awful thing happens. But in that sense, like, metaphor can help relate something that is truly evil and truly terrifying to not just one or two groups of underrepresented and marginalized peoples, but to everybody can feel that terror.
Yeah, I actually just did the same in my poem that just came out on spec, and with this lovely cover. The poem is called "They Each Pursue Beauty," and I have a verse about a white woman who does all these things to meet the expectations of her gender, and a black man who does everything to meet the expectations of his race. And then an alien comes along and takes them as the epitome of beauty and does terrible things to them. And the poem is, again, like what Max was saying, it is it's a social commentary, but by using some of the metaphor, and the poem goes deeper into metaphor by the end of it, I can make a social commentary on what we do to ourselves and our bodies, and then this outward force comes and does things to these people's bodies, and with a twist on it, and still a perspective of trying to bring that metaphor.
Metaphor is a great tool to really talk. It's not to deviate too much from the questions for a minute, but like, metaphor is a great tool to, especially with poetry, to talk about like social commentary, and really to really talk about images like that without talking about them, like in Other Terrors, for example. And if you donate $45 to the HW fundraiser, you get a free copy of Other Terrors. That's all I'll say. Anyway.
Okay, you can promote that. I think we're all HWA members here.
Shameless, man.
But like, in like, I used and I've done this in some of my other poems as well, but like, you know, I've used the metaphor of stars and ships, and you know, like I was a little on the nose with this, but I did like 6 million stars, and I think it was like 10 million something, 6 million obviously representing the Holocaust, and it was like 12 million that basically representing the transatlantic slave trade. But you can play around with things like that, you know, representing them as stars or ships or trains or whatever, and playing around with different images like that to talk about different things in history, and you know.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing too to bring up is that, and to answer Amy Drees, it is Scott B. Henderson is the artist of that cover. But I was talking about like to build an emotional bridge, but metaphor also helps to protect. Like there might be things that a reader might be like, oh, I just can't read that. That's just too much, you know, it's horrifying. It's going to trigger all kinds of these emotions I can't handle. But in a metaphor, it makes it can also pad it. Instead of building an emotional bridge, it can be an emotional buffer as well. So I didn't really think about that, but that's very true.
Mm-hmm. Make things a little more digestible.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, or you even talk about or talk directly to people or to power or to the audience, and if you're talking about them, a lot of times they can actually absorb it and digest it if you use metaphor. You know, just to add on to what you're saying, it really helps get past people's defenses a lot of times.
Amy Drees just put up a question about does it have to rise to repeated use to be a helpful metaphor? I think when you get into the repeated use, you have to run that fine line across, is it becoming cliche? And be careful of that. It can, of course, if you're using a cultural metaphor that people are familiar with. However, I think you can use something, and it may be, there may be a metaphor that's not necessarily clearly on the surface. Like my poem that's up for an Aurora Award, After the Apocalypse, was about my feelings of feeling so isolated during COVID. No one needs to know that to actually read this poem and understand the poem. So it's like if somebody years later is, you know, doing some sort of literature class on it, and it's like, students, find out what the hidden meaning is in this poem, then people could go, oh, I actually think it's about the existential navel gazing, or it's about loneliness. And that's the thing, is like when people analyze poems written yesterday or 100 years ago, we're sometimes pulling our own meanings into it. So you and I may have different, we may read differently from a poem that has a metaphor in it. Some will be very obvious and it will lead us towards a specific thing, and others it will be, you'll have to seek it enough that you might just grab a different commentary.
So I would like to, Amy, and you know, you can you know, type this real quick, but I would like to know your definition of a helpful metaphor. I think
that's actually where I was kind of stuck, is what do you mean by helpful? Like effective, or here we go.
That's a whole other thing, because I have a lot of thoughts on that. I
go back to that one.
Because like I use like imagery and metaphor of like a closet in a lot of my poetry. You know, like but I use that frequently. You know, I think if you're talking about a helpful metaphor in terms of like in one singular poem versus like using it so you're asking when does, well, I think okay, so I think that's a whole other class.
Isn't one like based more around length? Like allegory is basically like a longer.
No, allegory is allegory is a Angela can look up the technical definition while I butcher it. But allegory is, you know, like I am writing this poem, and it is meant to reflect the Trojan War or whatever. Like this poem is meant to. It's not a metaphor. It's not an as if.
Something unrelated, right? I could read off the actual technical definition for it. It says, in general, metaphor is a short phrase or paragraph that compares two seemingly unrelated things to make a point, while an allegory is a long narrative that uses a seemingly unrelated story to teach a lesson or prove a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think a lot of the Lao Tzu Buddhist, or not Buddhist, Taoist teachings are allegory. A lot of religious teachings and things like that anyways are allegory, but a metaphor would be more like, I can't think of anything that I want to say
is like
about
a box
Buddha.
of chocolates. Well,
So
That's a simile.
I think the answer to Pixie's question would be, it begins when your poem is, it begins when the meaning of your poem, when the meaning of your poem is either meant to teach something, or you're telling a story that has a different meaning. You're telling a story of, I'm just throwing, this is a really bad example, but like Peter the Rabbit, that is meant to tell an example of the Trojan War or something. I don't know why I'm thinking of the Trojan War, but like something like that.
Something unrelated, basically.
Chocolate bunnies.
Yeah. Zen cones are Zen cones are allegory. Yeah.
I think like the difference, like, so you could say like I feel like we're talking about Robert Frost a lot lately. But that road that my brain is cotton, not like cotton, but is cotton. The road less traveled by Robert Frost is a metaphor, like an extended metaphor for the journey through life and taking the path less traveled. But to turn that into an allegory, it would need not a lot more story, I think, to be an allegory. There would have to be like a character and things happening, as opposed to just this kind of an idea of taking. I mean, it's a pretty simple idea. Take the least traveled path, he urges. And an allegory would be expanded on that, and it's like a whole story about that to demonstrate maybe why even to take the less traveled path, like a demonstration of.
Like Dante's Inferno is an allegory. It's an allegory into man. It's an allegory of man's into sin, like that.
And there has to be more.
Yeah.
To lead them to the real world, regardless of the internal needs.
I'm going to say Amy's giving us the questions that I'm like trying to decipher through the cotton in my head. I'm like, helpful metaphor would be. So going back, to what we mean by helpful metaphor.
Nothing in itself.
So like effective communication, I read that as a helpful metaphor, meaning like it communicated.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I have another one.
Sorry.
Amy says sorry. That's okay, Amy. I think we're all batting with half a deck up here, to use that.
I just want to make sure that I'm answering.
Batting with half a deck.
I mean, I think the other piece to this too, it depends on the kind of poetry you're writing. Like if you're writing something like Dante, if you're writing like a long epic poem, or like then I mean, I think that also plays into it as well.
And you can have social commentary by just using metaphor as well. So one's not exclusive of the other.
Yeah.
No, I think that they're. I kind of think, and maybe this is me and the way I use them, but I think of both allegory and metaphor as the purpose is usually social commentary. I actually can't think of a good reason to use them not as social commentary. But again, that's my perspective, probably limited. That's just what it's a way to say, this pisses me off without really getting in trouble necessarily.
Yeah.
Kind of like 1984, things like that. Like a thing you want to say, but.
Are these answering your questions, Pixie? Amy, are these answering your questions?
I like that definition of allegory. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yep, I don't even know what definition that was anymore. So, because like cotton in my head. So where are we? Okay, so yeah, so next question. Can you share an example of a poem where you use metaphor or simile to illuminate a complex idea or feeling? And what was the process behind that? I'll say in my poem, The Nikekubi, which is about a Japanese type of vampire that tears off its, well, I'm sorry, it doesn't tear off its head. That's my definition. Its head removes and it floats around at night. Like a woman goes to sleep, her head removes, usually a woman for some reason in these stories, but her head removes and it's a vampire and it goes around and does obnoxious and chaotic things to people and sometimes threatening while she's sleeping. And so there's a lot of different, stories behind why might that happen. Sometimes she knows that she's the Nikekubi. Sometimes she doesn't know she's a Nikekubi. So I took that story and used that as a kind of a symbol of we tear ourselves apart from the pressure to conform, specifically because Asian women in the past, and I think women in general, and honestly people in general, we have these artificial pressures to conform a certain way, even though we're supposed to think outside the box and color outside the lines, but don't be like yourself. Absolutely conform to everybody else. So not to get into the mixed messages thing, but so that's what that was me using that breaking apart while you sleep when you lose control as what can happen to us or what does happen to us, I think. So that was also, I feel like, very long and overdone explanation. What about you guys?
I mean, I have a poem called Maggots on Macy's. The only thing more scary than a Huckabee is capitalism run rampant, right?
Yeah.
on the freaking
which creates the Nikekubi, probably.
like because I had gone out, because I'm not like a big shopper, so I went out. I was like, oh, I'm gonna buy stuff for my nieces and nephews for Christmas, and I literally caught anxiety for the first time in my life, just seeing how zombie-like and eager people was just to buy stuff. It kind of like freaked me out. So I remembered I just likened it to kind of like when you look under a microscope, if you ever look at bacteria on teeth, how like it looks like the bacteria is moving around, like the craziness of it, eating at the teeth, the decay of it, and it's like killing itself while it kills its home just to consume. So that's why I likened it to. I can actually read it if y'all wanted to hear it, but I have, it's just a giant metaphor for that.
Yeah, I say read it. How about read it? And that gives the rest of us more time to think of intelligent things to say.
Yeah, I would say intelligent things. I'm like, all right. So, maggots on Macy's, specks in the shadow, skyscraping teeth, inundated and buy this, buy that, hate this, hate that, fear them, fear me, fear you, buy this too. Our new coffin is wide enough to walk in, millions buried all at once, bustling maggots shopping on the course of our spirit, all to get there before they do, to get where, before who? Petty ambitions on missions to become, to please, to put others on their knees, to be as prosperous as the employer who bled us dry, suckling the marrow from our dreams. We're no better, it seems. Maggots in the maze of breathing corpses with horrifying dreams, ready to bleed each other for a handbag.
Sucking that marrow.
Yeah,
That's
I like
nice
that.
and squidgy.
Yeah, what was that line? A coffin wide enough to walk in? That is gold right there.
Mhm.
I love that. That is it. I'm going to say right now, that's my favorite poem I've ever heard you read, Jamal. Like my favorite poem that I ever read by you. I love that.
That means I got to do better.
we always
Thank you, Angela.
And I'm fevered right now too, so whatever I say cannot be held against me. We have a comment from Amy. She took Cersei shopping on Amazon Prime Day and used her as a metaphor of sexual dynamics and traditional roles last week and didn't reveal it was Cersei until the last line. I think that means probably last line, unless you knew the myth. I love that. And then there's a comment on that. Love it, love it, love it. Tell me she bought blackout curtains and pomegranate red dishwashing gloves. And then a comment, a lot of assonance in that one.
Yes, indeed.
And here's more compliments to Jamal. So the rest of the class is just going to be complimenting Jamal here. Chris Clay says, really great poem, Jamal. I loved your use of rhyme too. Very natural and not heavy-handed. And I agree. Yeah. And that coffin wide enough to walk in, I'm probably going to be trying to borrow that from you, Jamal, because that like says so much. I love that. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Who have we not heard from that question, which was, I will go back. Can you share an example of a poem where you used a metaphor or simile to illuminate a complex idea or feeling, and what was the process behind creating that?
So in my my Oz poems, I have red shoes, and anyone who's read the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's shoes are not red in the book; they were made red for the movie. So I decided to write a poem about how her shoes turn red, and both that the shoes are propelling her beyond her own. It's like she has no power because they're magical, and they're propelling her until she starts to realize. But I also have the process of the shoes turning red. And it's a metaphor for, and I leave it a little bit open to interpretation, that she's in a field full of poppies and they all pass out. And she awakes feeling broken and her shoes are red. So, it's like, was she raped? Did she come into womanhood? And that again, that is a metaphor, somewhat clear in the context of the story, but also the shoes are that metaphor for taking control of her life, not just being propelled by something without her even thinking about it.
I like it. Roofied by poppies.
Yeah,
I guess.
Exactly. Hey, morphine.
Yeah. How about you, Max?
Well, now I feel obligated to read this poem, especially since Colleen brought this up. So in Bleeding Rainbows and Other Broken Spectrums, it's blending with my background, which you can buy copies. I'm just kidding. I won't do that.
But I will share the link in the chat again for Halloween for July.
So the sections are divided into triangles. The last triangle is black, and the last triangle is titled "Bleed No More." So it very much flows into kind of like a history of gay homosexual, or like homosexual gay experience, etc. And one of the poems is titled "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," because of the association with that song and Judy Garland, and how that kind of became and still is an anthem in the gay community. So, and in a lot of her support for the gay community. So that this poem was kind of like a love letter to that song in a kind of a dark, a dark way, just considering its history and the AIDS epidemic and everything. So it's really short. So this is called "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." Familiar songs sung through crinkled lips like glass reflected, darksome melodies played across broken, beautiful spectrums of light. The same old song to some, but neon queens who strutted beneath the disco in dread of forgotten histories kicked up those awful trebles and tumults and cast them out like houses dropped from a dust devil's stomach. The song played throughout the generations as the anthem's trumpeting, where we marched across the yellow brick bodies of lovers, laymen, and lepers. No more would the broken glass make us bleed, or cackling witches keep us from returning home, so long as we sang familiar songs.
I love that.
That was beautiful.
I'm going to say being sick and just sitting back and listening to my friends read poetry is a pretty good way to do this. Like,
I also found a grammatical error when I read that poem. So
just now.
yeah, so it's fine. Doesn't
I
matter.
love that.
Doesn't
Which is
matter.
a good time
We'll
to bring
probably
up
who notice.
brushstrokes.
Nobody's gonna notice.
Well, this is a good time to bring up brushstrokes. I always want to say, like, even we think that things are manufactured because it's, you can get like dozens of them on Amazon, but somebody created these, and there's usually errors even after repeated edits and stuff. You'll find errors, which is why I never ever read anything that I've published ever again, because I don't want to see. I don't want to know.
Colleen will definitely find errors. Colleen will find every error that's in any manuscript you send.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever gone back and read Mobius or Oblivion, and I don't think I will.
Jamal,
yeah, I don't, because I don't want to know.
Of course. What was that about breaststrokes?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go up here and share some other questions.
Oh, it's for Pixie, it's a part of a book called I'm Not a Good Person, I'm a New Yorker. So it's like a collection that I have coming out. Not this year, but the following year. So it's not out yet. So I'll be reading stuff that's for my upcoming stuff, just to kind of experiment.
And then here's a comment for, I guess that's just for all of us. The Red Shoes is a fairy tale of self-destructive passions as well.
There's the one about the dancing shoes. Well, not only is it dancing shoes in Cinderella, but also there's the story with the ballerina with the red shoes. And so, yes, it's a strong thing. That's my Wizard of Oz poem is called Red Shoes, and it's in the Lore of Inscrutable Dreams out by this amazing publisher, Eureka Publishing.
Who's
and
that?
It's available on Amazon. Yeah, who's that?
That's that chaotic, controlled chaos woman that gets herself sick all the time.
That's right.
And then Max is like disappeared on us, but here's a comment for Max. Beautiful Max. And in Max's absence, I will say he probably wants to say you should go support the Halloween in July fundraiser from Amazon. I
feel like I'm stuck in a loop. Didn't I hear that already?
Yeah. This is a comment for you, Max, about your reading from Pixie.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, my dog was sitting like behind me, and like I have a dachshund, so he's like a heater, so I had to take him downstairs because it was
too hot.
Yeah.
Dachshund heaters.
He was like a heater, or he was a heater? Was he a simile or a metaphor?
He was a simile. He was like a heater.
But if he's putting out heat, isn't he a heater?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's why I asked. So
now we're going to have a philosophical debate about your dachshund for the rest of this meeting.
Yeah. Well, he's a wiener dog because he's like a wiener, or is he a wiener?
Or does he taste like a wiener?
And the class is canceled, so.
Yeah.
It was all good until Angela brought up wieners again. All right, so anyways, moving on, because I actually do have a syllabus. There is, I say controlled chaos because there is control back here in the back end. What challenges have you encountered in using metaphors and similes effectively? And how do you overcome them? I'm going to say for me, it's overusing them and writing down to readers, assuming they can't grasp a message that I'm trying to convey. And assuming that this message, this thing I'm trying to communicate is only my experience. Because human experience is cross-cultural, it's genderless, whether you're a man or a woman or gay or hetero or black or white, we all have hunger, we all have sorrow, we all have fear. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that I really try to watch out for, is that I'm not over-explaining and talking down to somebody like, well, I know your fear can't be like my fear, so let me tell you, because I don't know what the reader's fear is, and I don't know what the reader's hunger or sorrow might be like. And I might think mine is so bad, and they completely dwarf me if we were actually going to, I don't know how you would do that, but do a comparison. So that's one thing I try to avoid in metaphor and simile, really talking metaphor here, is not pretending, but forgetting that this is universal experiences that I'm trying to communicate and not just mine. And so I don't want to belittle somebody else's experience in my portrayal of it.
For me, I just come sometimes I don't. Sometimes I use metaphors too much, and I don't use simile enough because I see it almost like simile is almost telling. It almost feels like dialogue, like you're telling people something, whereas metaphor is more experiential. You know what I'm saying. While you're reading, you feel like you're taking part. It just to me that's how it occurs, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I also find that I could be sometimes I could keep things going a little too long with the metaphors. It's kind of like know when to get in to get out. It's like super important, like what you were saying, Angela. Um, but like for the most part, I think those are like my main issues with it. It's like not trying to overuse it all the time, trying to be too clever, trying to just trying to be too smart, trying to be too clever with it sometimes.
Mhm.
But nobody can really grasp what you're saying, or even if they do, if you do, it's like you get lost in words. So,
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yeah, I agree because I like the point of this is to communicate, and if we
Mhm.
lose that communication, then what are we doing? We're
Yeah.
just James Joyce at that point. Oh, sorry.
I I have sort of a different version of issues in that I'm writing a whole book of poetry on Rapunzel.
Mm,
And because of that, and because Rapunzel's in a tower all by herself for probably half of the book, and so I've got a lot of imagery that's flowing through different poems, and it's like her hair continues to grow. It is both her burden, and it's like well, locks are both a way of describing hair, but also a way of locking things down and imprisoning.
mm,
So, I do use that metaphor, but the challenge is to have these metaphors for other aspects of what's going on in Rapunzel's life and not have them be in every single poem. And, the hair comes in more than once, the tower comes in more than once, the ant witch comes in more than once. And that is a challenge both to have each poem be individual and move forward, and also not to reuse the same metaphors, but yet if I have a whole poem about her hair, I don't want to just keep saying hair or tresses. So then I'm using other imagery and words. So I do use locks, and so that is a challenge, how to kind of carry that through, make your poem fresh, um, and just not kind of reuse it too much.
Sorry, Derek just texted me, he told me to look outside because it's really eerie outside. So I was like, okay,
Ooh, is the cosmic Uber god coming in?
maybe.
He's only if Max is lucky.
I just have to say, Max, sorry, your background screen has the guys on it, and there's the one with the red with the white mask, and whatever else is in your background, it looks like something's coming out of his mouth.
I know it's the armchair.
Okay, so it's so weird. So I was like, is that a teddy bear emerging from his mouth? I don't know what it is.
No, it's a long cylindrical object. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I was going to hold all my comments about that because I know what the rest of that picture looks like.
I thought he was vomiting something up, but
Oh, and here is a comment. Are you drawing on Rapunzel, the plant, as well? Ooh, interesting.
Yes. My whole collection is going to be called my vegetal life. So yes, lots of vegetation.
All right. Did you have anything to add to that, Max?
I was actually looking at Oblivion and Flux, and it wasn't as terrifying as I thought it was going to be. I think, like, and I may have said this before when we talked about metaphor and simile at one point before, but like, or I may have said this one point before, like, one of the things I try to use, at least with simile, is that I try to use it as like a connector. At least with prose poetry, I try to when I'm writing long strings of prose, I try to not always I try to keep the simile as a way to lead you into another line of prose or something like that, especially when you only have like 300 or 400 words that you're working with or something like that. same thing with metaphor, you know, because, I don't, even if it's cosmic or weird, like it might be easier to use the metaphor of like,
The shiny apple.
and, as if it was as hideous as if he had gazed upon the first star of the universe. I don't know, something like that. Like, that you could play with an image like that everyone could be related to, but at the same time, you also kind of play with that like pastiche, that like Lovecraft pastiche, that's like oh, like the great thing that's rising out of the sea that's so terrible. It's as if, oh my god, like, so that's the one thing that at least when you're getting with like weird and cosmic poetry, regardless whether it's prose or free verse or anything like that, that I would say.
Yeah, I actually like that you brought that up because it kind of reminds me. I feel like I've been dissing simile, like dismissing it, like, oh, and then that simile is like whatever. Everybody knows what simile is. Who cares? But actually, simile is pretty powerful for when, like what you're saying, using it as a device to connect, but also to reduce words. So I do a lot of haiku, and I just really, probably for the first time ever, realized I do use a lot of simile in haiku because it's such an economy of words. So I can want to say something's coming in grand, I can just say like a god instead of using all my words to say, colossal and towering, it came in and the smoke billowed out from its feet and blah, 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 because that would be, just not enough words. But like a god, boom, you understand immediately that this thing is a certain type. It's colossal, it's timeless, it's eternal, probably. It's, awe-inspiring, all of those things that go with those three simple words.
That's good for
and then
haiku,
you've got more.
I would say that's good for haiku or like a very specific.
And when you need economy.
But I would say on the opposite, like if you're wanting to write like a long free verse or like a long prose, I would argue on the economy of less.
Yeah,
my love
I
is
agree
like
with
a
you.
red rose.
Yeah, like I'll read
bleeding everywhere.
Like I actually don't know that I have. So there's. Oh, I just had it. I don't know that I used any similes in this poem.
I definitely use fewer similes than metaphors. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we're actually biased against simile, which is kind of why I wanted to bring up, there is actually a place for it, like when you need an economy of words.
Wow.
But I do, as soon as I see that I've written like, I usually try to take it out, unless it is something where it's just a very sparse thing.
And I know this is going to sound really against the antithesis of this whole lecture, but like,
I'll remove you from the studio if that happens. It's okay.
And maybe this is just St. Joshi speaking through me, but like, I try to use them as little as possible. At least in prose poetry, again, it's more of like the prose. Like the prose is more important. Using the prose and building the image. Going back to the lecture, the imagery is more important than the metaphor or simile that's built in the imagery, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying that you should not use simile or metaphor, but like I was trying to find an example on one, and I was like, oh, I didn't really use that many in this collection at all. So that doesn't really help my case right now.
I think because we write speculative works, mostly like we're talking about the speculative genre, it is more like that we do simile less because it's like I have a poem here which is called Patchwork Girl, and the first verse is I stitched on my leg after he tore it off, unhappy I could stand on my own. Now I could say I put myself back together like I was a stuffed doll, but which would be the simile, but instead we go straight to bring in that supernatural or that mystical or magical aspect by just making our beings those creatures. So we do use the metaphor more than I think simile, just in the genre we write, but not saying that we don't. But I'm sitting here flipping through, going like, do I use simile? I'm sure I have. I just can't find it.
So there was a small. I used like a small bit of simile in this poem, which was, I think it was nominated for a Riesling or a push. I don't remember, but like this was like, it's the creature. This is from my poem Cyber Things. It goes. This is like the last line toward the bottom, but it says, the creature spoke in tweets, flashed with abhorrent snaps of spectral light, and dripped recorded thoughts which sprayed through our minds like bites of time.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you use bites like BYTES?
Yeah.
Nice.
And I do have one at the end of my poem Rapunzel and Medusa, where they are communicating through their isolation. And right near the end, I also say, like Abelard and Eloise, isolated yet together. So there's a simile, but I would say I use fewer similes than metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like going back to like what Amy says. I think it's. Oh, was I just talking over you, Jamal? I'm so sorry.
No, you wasn't. I was just laughing what Amy posted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean that's a good example. You
That's
know,
great.
drink a little bit high, wonder what you're at up above the world, like a teacher in the sky.
Yeah. So I think it's use it in judgment, like anything. You can't say like, what is it Stephen King says never use adverbs, and I often want to say, oh fuck you, like excuse my language, but sometimes you do have to use them, and then you get the people that if you ever use an adverb, this piece is now trash because they take it like everything in moderation. I think that the caution is more to not overuse things and use them wisely and purposefully than use or not use.
Yeah, I
absolutely.
Think it depends, and I think it also just goes. It depends on the type of poet. Like I use adverbs a lot when I'm writing poetry.
Yeah, and then if you take that literally and don't have any kind of sense of, well, Stephen King said so, but is he writing poetry? What is the purpose of him saying that? We have to think for ourselves and be reasonable. And I apologize, everybody, that I just dropped the F-bomb during this class.
That's it. You're kicked out. Go sit in the back room.
Did you say fuck?
Oh, and that's when we got banned. Sorry, Joe. We're all fired. Yes, and thank you, Amy. I agree with that.
I agree with that.
Yeah. That's why these things are guidelines.
Yeah, because I mean, I've done a Alice Jabberwock poem where I twisted how we put the language together and made up some of my own verbs for that because, hey, Jabberwock, right? Yeah. So that's why I do like to stress, even what we're saying doesn't mean like we're not like the masters of poetry or anything. So masters of the universe.
We're all doing it's guidelines, and then you take what somebody says and you break it up into small pieces, and then you grind it under your heel and you remake something better, and you are out of it. Going on, can you guys discuss a metaphor or simile from a poem, either yours or another poet's, that has significantly impacted you and why? I'm going to go back to Road Less Traveled because I keep bringing that up. I can't think of anything else right now.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
Did Forrest Gump really say that, or was he like who actually said that? I don't think Forrest Gump was the first.
I thought he did, but then people put in there were lots of memes and that of what the box of chocolates was like afterwards. Sometimes it's crunchy, sometimes it's a creamy center, sometimes it tastes like gag. I don't know. I mean, but I think he did say life is a box of chocolates, but then what the philosophy, and that may now be our most famous simile out there.
Yeah. And I always think life is like a box of chocolates. It's meant to be devoured, stomped on, and discarded without mercy.
Wait a minute, in that order? You're going to devour it and then stomp on it? So is that
you stomp on the empty box. Body? You devour everything in the box. You stomp on the empty box. Once you have sucked the marrow out of life, just stomp on it because it doesn't matter anymore. And then cast it into the refuse pile. No recycling.
No, you put it in recycling.
Trash it, landfill it. So I'm just going to be quiet. I don't know where I'm going. I've got a fever.
Well, you're not batting with a full deck. So
I'm not batting with a full deck at all.
Speaking of
Pixie
metaphors.
says, we're all adults. I'm struggling not to use well-placed intentional profanity in my works. I agree. Let's bring
So-
on the profanity.
Well,
Profanity.
okay, that's a whole nother.
Profanity.
I'm struggling not to use well-placed. Okay, I've been told of. I know I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole with this real quick, but that just raises my professional opinion on the use of profanity is not to sound like a prude. I mean, because I've used profanity, like I've used the word like fuckery or like cyber fuckery in Bleeding Rainbows, but that is specifically like a homoerotic kind of collection. I think it depends on
The theme.
generally. I don't know. I don't always use profanity. I like damn is fine. I've used shit in some, and I'm not using this as an excuse to curse, I promise.
Right.
Like I wrote a poem called Dumpster Inside My Skull, and it was kind of a weird poem, and I used I was playing
Sounds like a metaphor.
like shit mountain was something I was playing around with. So I think if you're being intentional, like St. Joshi rejected a poem of mine because he didn't like I used the word fuck in it, and he ended up taking another poem. He usually takes poems by some of them, but he was like, I don't like that you used the F word in this. Okay, fine, whatever. So I think if you're going to use profanity in poetry, use it sparingly, or use it purposefully. Don't just be like, oh, fuck you or something like that. Make it powerful and make it purposeful if you're going to use profanity in poetry. That would be
I wrote a poem called Cunt Potent, and cunt is a very harsh word that has a lot of bad meaning, but I actually took it back to its root, and where there is a word that means contempotent, that is contempotent, which means actually to have to be very strong and have womb strength. So yeah, and I did get that one published. Don't ask me where or when.
Well, and Amy, your comment about it uses the F word in the F position and it will never be published.
I want to read that.
That's not true. I mean, someone might publish that. It just
be quiet. Space and Time might be after that poem right now. Okay, you don't know. Space and Time wants to read that poem, Amy. So.
I don't think there's a problem with sending out stuff like that. Some publishers won't. Others will.
I think it comes down to it is a word of power. It is a word that smacks people and affects people more than other words Yeah. So use it like that, like a word of power. Don't just sprinkle it. You see those poems that are trying to be edgy and they're like, fuck, 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 fuck. And then you're like, by the end of it, you're like, whatever. Can you think of another rhyme with duck besides that? I mean, come on, guys.
It just becomes crass after that.
Well, and that's like any word. That's like any word.
Yeah.
This is true in anywhere in life in general. Just don't use profanity without purpose.
Since we're bringing this up, though, and I usually don't bring this up because, it is one of those words of power, I will say one of my favorite places to be published is in a magazine called Pussy. And it is not what you think it is, but I submitted that poem and wrote it just so I could put that in my bibliography, which reminds me I have to update my bibliography to include that I was once published in Pussy magazine. So sorry. And we are probably canceled. This is the last class, guys. I'm sorry. We ruined the whole thing.
The craziest class so far.
Okay, when you've heard out there are comedians that drop F-bombs constantly, and I actually find it tiring because it's to me it's overused. But that's to place it well, to use it liposucted rhymes. I think I don't think we're writing in horror. We're writing some pretty graphic shit. And, if people are going to publish that in a way that the graphic horror can be more disturbing than saying fuck.
I agree.
No chicken towning.
So
And
okay.
I mean, we're talking
Anyways,
about metaphors, so I mean, like, you can, I mean, profanity is, can be used, for
mhm.
metaphor in, in. Oh, there's a lot of thunder going on right now. Sorry, profanity can be used in as a metaphor in a lot of different ways. So, just depending on the poem you're writing, you can, you can have a lot of fun with that.
Mhm.
Yes.
Exactly.
I try to.
All
I
right.
mean, I love to curse, but I like to substitute profanity with like more with symbols more. More than just being like fuck, fuck, fuck,
Like
fuck, fuck. You know what I
like
mean? Just
this and this.
yeah,
Yeah, you know what that's called? I love this word, grawlix. It's
What?
if you use like hashtag at symbol period upside and whatever, like all
yeah,
that,
yeah.
it's called
Frolics.
grawlix, and I freaking
Oh,
love that word.
Frolics.
oh, I didn't know
Grawlix.
that was called. That's interesting.
Yep.
Now,
And
I'm sure everyone, and I assume that I just don't want to make assumptions, but I assume everyone in this class, knows the difference, but it's still technically a form of profanity. Like, there are curse words, and then there are slurs. There are like cultural slurs.
Oh
I
yeah,
mhm.
personally have never used, even trying to make a symbol. I've stayed away from using things like that in my poetry. I know some people want to, like, I know some people do, but that is something I personally don't feel comfortable doing. Actually, I'm looking at other tears. I don't know if I used. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna double check this before I sound like a hypocrite. Other terrors was that story was a little different, but I don't think I actually.
So are you saying that you used like the frolics, the like hashtag and at
No, I'm
sign?
saying using like using
actual like
like using like the
racial slurs.
like racial
Oh,
slurs or anything like
right,
that.
right, yeah, yeah.
Like
Which I
that.
did not in other terrors. So I just
I think that makes sense though, because you have words of power like
yeah.
profanity, but then you have words with too much power, and it's been negative power. So that would be like, I don't know if we're supposed to be able to talk about J.K. Rowling or not, but I'm going to go out there. So I'm sorry if like I'm not supposed to talk about her. But using Voldemort, and they said he who now shall not be named because his name was such a negative
Yeah,
connotation, it would give people fear. It's kind of what remind like my brains kind of reminds me of like
They give
racial
me fear.
slurs in a way, but also by not using it, it gave him power. So that's again where you as the artist have to really take a look at how you're using the words and everything. You know what I mean? And I myself don't use racial slurs
yeah.
because I
Yeah.
don't want to I don't want to
If
keep
I
them going.
if I was writing a character that was to be shown as bigoted, then perhaps, but
Even if I was writing a character, I wouldn't. That's I
it,
mean,
it would be difficult. It
I
would be
think it
because,
depends.
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like it depends on a lot of factors, at least for me. Because if I'm going to be true to certain neighborhoods or something like that, as a
yeah.
black dude, there's certain words that I probably can write and use. I get uncomfortable when you got white people writing those sort of things sometimes. But I can understand if the material is solid and it's historical or it's really intense. It's to stay true to the
yeah,
character. You kind of let it
if
intuitive.
you're crafting a poem
But
that's like a historical
I
realism or
don't know.
something like that,
I just
I
sometimes
can.
feel
Yeah.
like I just feel like sometimes it's yeah. I feel like it depends on a lot of factors, but I
Yeah.
think if you can't navigate that maze, then stay away from it.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
will
risky.
say
It's
I
high risk, low
actually
reward a lot of the times.
yeah. I just realized I do actually use a slur in Inugenie, the book that I'm finished. That well, it's finished, but I'm editing it now to release. But the Okinawan girls would be called honeys by the military guys, and it basically meant like a honey, a girl that I'm going to give her a can of spam, and she's going to do all these things for me, for my manly needs and my comfort and everything. So I did use that that's a slur, but it's not a common slur, but I really wanted to give that sense of how dehumanized these girls were. So I take that back. I have used a slur, but I think like Amy's saying, use them very wisely and sparingly and, for a reason.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
my poem Cinnabar and Shadow Atlas, which takes place in Fantan Alley in Victoria. And it was about Chinese prostitutes. So I had to look up some of the terms that were used then, and to stay true to the poem and the historical era, I needed to use some of those terms. And some of those were just, I guess there's slang and there's slurs, and they're not always the same, though they can often become the same.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, that you don't have to necessarily use them to have a character be a character. I mean, if anything, it maybe gives permission for them to be used, and they really need to not be used at all. Like, kind of die, like hopefully, like at some point that can completely die out of our experiences as humans, but probably not this year.
That's hopeful, wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
well, we're all going to burn up before that happens anyways.
Yeah, obviously.
What time is it anyways?
We're past. We're over time.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so yeah, I guess we're actually out of time. Who's running this show? Like, who's responsible for keeping us on track? I don't know. But probably Maxwell, because he's the director.
Right.
It's our cosmic overlords.
Yeah. Come on, AI, take over here.
We're at my house. That's what all this thunder is about.
That's right. They're just stepping in.
I do. I guess that's time for us. I think we got through like not even half of these questions, which I will be sending out to everybody for further discussion. But yeah, basically that's it for this week. I say surprise, like, oh wait, what time is it? Next week is understanding tone and voice, the relationship between tone and meaning, and developing a personal voice is what we will be talking about. And yeah, we are halfway there, guys. I do want to say, like, for the poetry, not to be using profanity, but some kick-ass poetry has been being sent in. I've really seen some that I'm like, this is my favorite poem. This is a favorite of mine from a bunch of you guys. So, and I can't think of anybody that I'm like, that's not great poetry, So how about you guys? Like,
there was just one person. There was one person. No, I'm joking.
Better not say Angela.
Everything was in good.
I was going to say Angela.
No, everything's been good.
No,
everything's been
Angela,
really
she's not doing her assignments.
I have not.
I've been seeing like everybody's getting way better, way deeper, and I'm just so impressed with all the forms everybody's trying too. A lot of fun.
And people are experimenting a lot too.
Yes.
They're doing a lot of combining forms, tone, all these different things. Is really cool. Cool to read.
Yeah, I think it was it Michael Payne that sent us an email for Jamal and said something about his brain is breaking open and the goo is falling out or something like that. I'm terribly misquoting that. But that's the idea. We want to break your brains open and all the goo fall out because our goo is falling out.
What a metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
Just truthfully. But also it's like, there is no one expert in poetry. And, we're all like, and you guys are probably seeing that when we're critiquing, giving you comments in your poems, that sometimes we may be saying things opposite from what the other person said. And that's where, you can choose what you want and decide if it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. There's no, like, that's the thing with poetry is it's so subjective. Like what one person loves, another person won't love. And so use everything that we're saying, add 2 cents to it, a whole bunch of salt, and take what you want out of it and dump the rest.
Eat the chocolates and stomp on the box and throw it away.
Exactly. I think that's
with the ball of wax in it.
So, Max, you have any closing kind of fare thee well, see you next week statements?
I No.
You could sing that song, Farewell, because I know you like musicals.
Farewell.
So long, farewell, Swedish,
The
or
Sound of
something.
Music.
Yeah,
The
that
Sound of
one.
Music. Yeah. And then we'll spin in a circle going. Do, 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 do.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to let our
Yeah, because
poor
Max,
and
Max is gritting his
patient
teeth now.
and tolerant students. Goodbye until next week, you guys. Thank you all for being here again. And I am finally caught up on my critiques. So I thank everybody's patience as I was kind of like slowly moving my way through. And thank you, Chris. Yes, we are going to be better. I went to the doctor today. Jamal looks like he's on the mend.
I'm back.
Maxwell is getting ready to get sick from stress. You know, it's going to hit him like right before next class. So, and Colina's doing pretty good, I think, so far. She's staying healthy.
Also, I think I'm caught up. So if anybody has sent me a poem and they didn't get a comment, like poke me because maybe I lost it.
If I have not gotten to your poem, I will. I promise.
All right. And from Max, go support the Halloween in July fundraiser, I think is what he wanted to say.
We do
And
have a dark poetry scholarship, so
we do. Oh,
There
yeah, which
is.
we talked about. And that is August 1st is the deadline for that. So you guys have 10 days? Yeah, 10 days mathing with the
And you don't have to
Cottonhead.
be an HWA member to apply for it.
Yep. And that is, I believe, like $2,500 or $1,500 or something.
Something like that.
Yeah. So,
To
all
put
right.
towards your poetry education.
Exactly. Buy more classes like this and poetry books.
tell your
And we
friends.
can I'll tell you those books. Anyways, I'm like meandering now. I need to go eat dinner and like go take this medicine. Bye, guys.